I've
And
had a
greetings
chance to
and
do it.
hold on one sec. Okay, let's take two. And this is where I say, and greetings and welcome to the QCast. This is season 6, episode 7. And we are well into the Division 3 basketball season. A lot of great games have been taking place since Thanksgiving. We have more coming up this week as we get into conference play in many leagues. And I thought it would be really fun to bring in a friend of the program here, and that's someone who is known across Division 3 basketball in many many circles, and that is retired DePauw men's basketball coach Bill Fenlon. Kind of a legend across many fronts, I have to say, Coach. And what I wanted to ask is, in researching this, I was watching an interview in your final days at DePauw. It was done by an ABC affiliate, WRTV in Indy, and they asked you sort of like, "What are you going to do now?" And you said, "I'm very curious what normal people do." And I'm just wondering here, this is your 4th year of retirement with no basketballs bouncing. Have you figured out, Bill Fenlon, what normal people do yet?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if being retired is like normal, right? I don't know that actually qualifies as normal people stuff. But so like I played pickleball for 3 hours today.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty cool.
Big
And not
time.
many people get to do, normal people don't get to do that. They got to go to work and be productive and do some stuff. So I'm actually still trying to figure that part of it out. You and I talked earlier. I've been trying to keep my hand in during the season with broadcasting stuff and having some fun with that. I do a little bit of that down here as well, and I've been approached to try to you know, maybe, come in and be the guru with a couple of different teams and, the old guy who's got a better idea kind of thing. But I just don't know if I'm just not sure I could be like a 1 or 2 day a week guy like that. Like I don't know if
Right.
I could, be part of a team but not part of a team, right? So I've I've not jumped at any of those things yet because I just don't know if I could do it without putting both feet in. But I do miss it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't.
So just so people have some context here, 37 seasons as a head men's basketball coach at the college level, 587 wins. He's the all-time wins leader at DePauw with 480. Head coach at Sewanee, head coach at Rose-Hulman, head coach at Southwestern, and again, most of that time, 30 seasons as the head coach at DePauw. Bill, as you look back, I mean, on all again, this is the 4th season that you've been out of it. But first, an obvious question is, how much do you miss this time of year and just being in the mix of all that? So how much do you miss that?
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, a lot. Uh, Q. The the thing that got me out of it really was the recruiting,
Sure.
right? I think if you told me right now that you would get the team and give it to me and let me put it together and coach it, I think I could still do that, and I think I would love to do that, and
Sure.
I think I would still have the energy and the things that you need to have to do that. What I didn't have was the energy to get in my 10-year-old Prius and drive around the Midwest
Oh,
and watch really bad basketball in the summers and tell kids and families how great their kid is when he really needs to get better at X, Y, and Z. And, and then the landscape of college basketball now, it doesn't affect us at the D3 level as much, but there is trickle down effect in terms of expectations of players and families and that sort of
sure.
stuff. And I just didn't, feel like I could have phoned that part in, I suppose, for a few more years, but I just, I had this thing about always, trying to do my best to be as good as we could possibly be. And if you don't go out and you don't hustle and you don't get players, you're not going to be very good. And I didn't think that was fair to anybody. So it was really the recruiting part And I did enjoy kind of helping kids with their college decision, right? But especially at a place like DePauw, I mean, I know how locked in you are to Illinois Wesleyan, and places that are high academic and really serious about their mission, and really want to have that kind of purist sort of combination of athletics and academics. You got to find kids that care about that,
Right.
and that matters to, and families that it
Right.
matters to, and very often, kids are over identifying as athletes, right? And
Right.
under identifying as students.
Absolutely.
And that was a thing that I spent a lot of time with our players and a lot of time in recruiting, trying to help guys going like, hey, you're a good enough player. There's probably a lot of places you could play,
Right.
right? What you have to do is figure out the other stuff.
Right.
Right. I used to tell them, I'd sit them down in my office and I'd point out towards the gym, and I'm like, and I'd ask them about their list. And I said, well, you know what? Every school at that list, on that list, has a big room with a wooden floor like that out there, and some baskets hanging from the ceiling, and a rack of balls, and a guy like me. Right. Your job is to figure out what the other stuff is,
Right.
right? And how you can access that stuff, and how that can make a difference for you as you're about to head out into a really important part of your life, between
Right.
being 18 to 22 years old and away from home for the first time, and making a lot of decisions for the first time, and those kinds of things, I think, are something that in recruiting, families and kids, they weren't locked into that as much
Right.
as I thought they should be locked
Sure.
into that. So I spent a lot of time in the recruiting process, talking to people like that, and a lot of time with our kids on campus, making sure that they weren't trying to live up to the kind of the prototype or the stereotype that people have for athletes.
Question about DePauw, and kind of DePauw as what we'll just call like the full package of stuff. I always compare, when people somehow get into conversation with Division III schools. A lot of times I'll say Illinois Wesleyan and DePauw are very similar in a lot of ways. They're about the same size, school wise. They're similar, and I think where they're also similar is, I think Illinois Wesleyan's able to recruit such good kids because it really has the whole package of stuff. It's a good school, it's a good sports place, it's a good town. You've got a lot of things going. And talk a little bit, if you would, Bill, about like DePauw as an institution that you were the college basketball coach at, and how having all that stuff in place helped you do what you did there.
Well, I think you got to have a lot of things lined up, right? Like you have to have a faculty that cares about it, and they help with the recruiting. I mean,
Right.
it was very rare that I didn't have 4 to 6 kind of go-to faculty members that I could sit a family down with, and they could talk about their side of campus. I think the thing that we didn't have, as I listened to your list there, was we didn't have the town thing as
Yeah.
much, right?
True.
So we Greencastle is much
Smaller.
a much different place than Illinois Wesleyan situation. And we got beat up on a lot of kids for that reason, right?
Sure. Sure.
I think Wesleyan always had that. They had all the good things that we had, and they're right across the street from a bigger school,
Right.
and there's restaurants and places to go and stuff to do, and place you can have your first legal beer and all of those kinds of things, and that was the piece that made our situation just a little more difficult,
Sure.
right? Because it was in such a small town, it made it feel like a little bit of a smaller place, right? And
Right.
and I think that was something that we had to get over a little bit in recruiting. Um, you know, Greek life was really big, right? So if a kid was attracted to that sort of thing, there was probably too much of that going on. They would have access to that, but that was a really a big part of the the social fabric of the place, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're in a little bigger place, you can go in a lot, you could take it in a lot of directions. But that said, we had great programs, great professors. We had all kinds of successful teams in the athletic department. Um, our kids were doing internships and getting access to
Yep.
an alumni network that really is second to none for a place like of that size. And we had to kind of educate people about that stuff, right? Like they don't really recognize on the front
Right.
end. The thing about coaching and recruiting and that sort of stuff is you might be doing it. Uh, you're recruiting. Your list might coming out of the summer might have 50 guys on it, right, or whatever, and you're trying to whittle that down to 4 to 6 guys, whatever your school is trying to get to. Um, but these families, they're doing it once,
Right.
right? You're doing it over and over
Yep.
and over again, and I think you have you have to have the patience to sort of help people navigate that stuff, because at Division 3, everybody's deal is going to be different, right? So selling that other stuff is really important. When you're at the Division 1 level, it's like, hey, we got a scholarship for you.
You're right.
Here's our gym, here's our locker room, here's the coach, right? And people
Right.
are really making their decisions based on that. And I think at the D3 level, everybody's financial aid package is going to be a little bit different, right? And that's the hardest thing about recruiting at that level, because you don't you don't get the final answers until you're really far down the
Yeah.
the road. And I used to tell assistants all the time, it's like, we're the things that we were looking for. Is the guy good enough to help us, right? That's one thing. Is he a good enough student? Is he going to be able to get in, right? And then the third kind of nebulous category was what I called the gettability factor, right? Like, will he be able to come if he wants?
Right.
Is he gonna get aided to a place where the family can make it work if they
Sure.
really like it, right? And we the big key, I think, to recruiting is, you'll have guys that like you, and you like them, and you just can't make it work,
Right.
right? And the quicker you can find that out,
Sure.
the better for everybody, right? Because you end up spinning your wheels
Yeah.
on things that were never going to happen, right?
Right.
You end up spending time and energy and resources trying to recruit a guy who, in the end, when he gets his financial aid package, he was never coming.
Right.
It was never gonna happen. So becoming an expert at that part of it, you kind of have to have a little bit of a crystal ball. You got to go to Google Maps and see where the kid lives and what kind of car he's got sitting in his driveway, and what does mom and dad do for a living. If it just it's an art. It's not a science, that's for sure.
Yeah, you can waste a whole bunch of time in recruiting. I'm sure I stay really connected with the Titans and all that. And it's amazing to me. I always tell Ron and his stuff, like, I don't know how you guys do it. Like I hear about this kid from July until February. And then all of a sudden you see on Twitter the kid commits to a D2, or I'm like,
Right.
I don't know how you get that phone call. I don't know how you get that all the work that goes into these relationships with these kids just to get in position in February or March for this kid to call you. And he calls you and he's going, maybe even to a competitor. Hey, I'm going to Augustana. Uh, was that a super tough part about the recruiting process? Is just like the investment in a kid that ends up not coming. I guess the gettability thing helps you, but at the end of the day, you're all in on this kid and he goes somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, I think what would what would what would get you is if he could have come, right?
Sure.
Losing the guy that you could have got, right, where the Ducks were in a row.
Right.
He could have come if he wanted to come, right? and he decided to go somewhere else. That means you didn't do a good enough job, right?
Right. Right.
To me, I mean, if the stars are aligned in a different way, and he goes somewhere else, so be it. Like he didn't get aided enough, or whatever. Uh, or maybe it's size of school, maybe it's something that you
Yeah.
can't control. But if all the controllables are in place and you just get beat because you didn't do a good enough job, and very often it's like, oh, you're going to make your college decision based on how many times I got in my car and drove to see you play. That's why you go to Kentucky, right? You go to Kentucky because you got more love from, whoever, from
Right.
the staff. You at our level, you make your college decision like a regular college student,
Yeah.
right? Like where what kind of springboard is this place going to be for me, 10 years out, right? 15 years out? Am I going to be able to take off from this place, 5 years from now, and really get going? And uh, that is a very hard thing for 17-year-old kids to
Yeah.
wrap their brains around, right?
Absolutely.
And if the parents aren't thinking in those ways, you can talk until you're blue in the face, and it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. But yeah, I mean, it's like getting beat, on a last second shot, right? It's like
Right.
it sucks,
Right.
because you're competing and recruiting, just like you are on the
For
court,
sure.
right? You're trying to sell what you have, and you're trying to find different ways to talk about it, and different ways to show it, and different ways to sell it. And you're trying to find kids that are good matches. And when you feel like you have that and it doesn't work, it's like getting beat.
Want to kind of go way back and just get your take on just where the development of basketball kids is currently. When I grew up, I'm a 1989 high school graduate, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and we were playing basketball all summer long and pickup games. I'd get we'd get some phone calls going around the South Side. We'd have our guys show up at Beverly Lawn Park. They had a little full court. It wasn't legit like 94 feet, but it had basket here, and we'd play all day. And if you won, you stayed. If you lost, you had to sit out. And nowadays, the AAU scene and how structured everything is with what kids do in terms of basketball is today better. I'm sure that you grew up in a world that looked like my world, because there wasn't really all this structure. Is today better? Is
Shorts,
today worse?
shorts were shorter in my world,
They're for sure they
a
had to
lot
have been.
shorter.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I got kind of into the Michael Jordan era there, and they got real long. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think the players are more athletic. I don't know why, right? Like I don't know why guys are, bigger, stronger, faster,
Yeah.
right, than they were. Because in theory, you know, genetically or biologically, the species shouldn't be able to make some of the leaps that it seems to have made that way in like one generation or two
Right.
generations. It really should take longer than that, right? And
Right.
now you got, everybody's dunking, and everybody's quick twitch and fast, and
Yeah.
big and strong. I mean, I played in the Big Ten in the '70s,
Yeah.
right, at Northwestern, and I got a team picture where my D3 teams. I mean, we had taller guys, but some of my D3 teams were bigger and
Sure.
stronger than those guys, right?
Right. Right.
Because we weren't in the weight room, we weren't doing, we weren't training in those ways. And I think that's one of the things that I can't explain that one, but
Right.
it's real, right? I think what you hear from coaches quite often is, when you hear coaches sitting around, talking about things they're looking for or whatever, and you hear the word leadership all the time, right?
Sure.
It rings hollow after a while, right? And I think there's a real lack in that area, and I think it goes back to what you were talking about is these kids, everything is prescribed for them
Yeah.
from the very first time somebody puts a ball in their hands. They're telling them what to do, where to go, how to do it, right?
Yeah.
They're dropping them off, picking them up, right? Paying a bunch of money to do it, right? So you better be
Yeah.
getting my money's worth out of it. And the kids don't say a word, right? They don't call the fouls, they don't pick the teams, they don't settle the arguments, they don't do all the things that actually develop those leadership skills,
True.
right? And so then they get to college or high school even, and the coach is going, "Why don't we have any leadership out here?" Well, nobody has a voice. Nobody knows
Great
what
point.
to say or what to do, and I think that's something that uh, you don't really teach that necessarily, right? I just think you have to be in some sort of environment where that can grow,
Right.
kind of naturally, kind of organically. And because kids now don't have those experiences where they're unsupervised, right? And also when you're unsupervised, you can sort of test things out. You can test things out interpersonally. You can
Right.
also test things out athletically, right? Like if all I do is play in AAU games, I can never really work on my new stuff, right? I can
True.
only, because there's a chance I might lose, and if I lose, it's going to be terrible, right?
Right.
And I think that those are things that going to the park and playing and figuring it out on your own is super valuable, and I think kids today miss that. I think the other thing that is kind of that I've noticed is uh, kids don't value wins and losses as much because they play so many games,
True.
right? They
Yeah.
they'll play a freaking NBA season in the summer,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And it's like we're gonna go play this team from Georgia. We get lost, we get beat
Right.
on a buzzer beater, and it's like, okay, give me my Subway sandwich, and we'll get them this afternoon, right? We'll get them this afternoon, right? So the value of the game, it's just not as high, right?
Right.
Because you're playing so many games. It used to be, hey, when you were getting ready, everything you did was to get ready for your high school basketball season, right? Like, and you know, everything pointed towards that. And you had, depending on what state you were in, you had somewhere between 20 and 30 games that you were going to play. And every one of those games was a big deal,
Yeah.
right? It was life or death for high school basketball players. And now I just don't think it feels that way as much to kids. I mean, it's not saying
Right.
they're not bummed out when they lose, but I just think the experiences of playing in so many games, it just sort of waters it down a little bit.
And a great point about the social aspect of like having to figure out how to get people to the games in the summer, get into the playground, and even the I love what you said about who's like calling the fouls, like the dynamics that play out over the course of a day or a summer on that. Are you going to be the guy
Yeah,
that's calling the
yeah,
fouls or just letting it go? Or how do we know when stuff gets a little heated, what happens? You're right. There's none of that that really transpires. Um, and I don't mean to sound like, like back when I was a young guy, but I think in this case, you're exactly right. Now, the kids today are probably they're stronger because they're lifting and people are telling them to. They're probably more skilled because they're doing all this skill stuff. Um, and what you said really hit home with me about like this genetic mutation thing. There's a kid that's on Illinois Wesleyan, Brady Keel, that's just this 6'7" dude. He's a junior. His dad is my age. and played at Illinois Wesleyan. He was a fraternity brother of mine. I saw him at the opening tournament up at halftime. They were playing Oshkosh. And we just got to talking about like, he's like, is this how my teams work, Q? And I go, you guys look nothing like this group of
Yeah,
Titans.
yeah,
These
you look like
dudes
a great.
these dudes are jacked
You look
up.
like a grade school team.
And he goes, that's what I thought. He goes, I took Brady to the Wash U Wesleyan game last year. And he goes, I don't remember it being like that. I go, it's because it wasn't. It is amazing how the kids are bigger and stronger, just like one generation later. Isn't that's kind of crazy?
It's wild. But going back to the links between what's going on and recruiting. I think that's sort of the kind of the trickle down effect, because the investment that families are making in this stuff, right? Whether it's a personal trainer
Yeah.
or a AAU program or whatever. I mean, I don't know. Maybe in this closet back here, I have my soapbox, but it is one of the things that just drove me out of it ultimately. I mean, I had to go sometime, right? But you would go as a recruiter, right? And you would go to these big events, right? And you would typically we'd have a list, and we weren't just fishing blind. I mean, we knew the kids that we wanted to see, and when they were playing, and those kinds of things. And people don't even realize this, but you go to a big event, and they have a couple of different doors, right? So they have a door for mom and dad, who, by the way, have already gotten clipped for
Right.
between 500 and $5,000 for the kid to play on the team in the first place,
Right.
right? And then they've driven from God knows where to go to and luckily there's a lot of big events that get held in Indianapolis. So we weren't very far from there. So it was, that was a little bit easier. But, you're driving from Kansas City, you're driving from, God knows where to play in these events. That's not free. Gas is not free. Taking
Yeah.
time off work is not free. And so then in their door, they're going to charge you again to come in and see your kid play, right? And you're going to put them in a hotel, and that's going to cost you money too. So you've got all of this dough invested in what's going on, right?
Right.
And then it's like any other investment. People want return for it. What's my return? And 80% of these people think their kids are going to play in college, when the reality is only less than 3% of them are going to play in college.
Right.
The numbers just
Yeah.
don't work. And the other thing that drove me nuts was the other door. I couldn't go in that door where the parents were, right?
Right.
I had to go. And so the parents are getting charged anywhere between 20 and $30 for a day, right? To go in there. And the door that I'm in, I'm getting charged between $200 and $400
Right.
to get the rosters and the whatever. And I am getting clipped,
Ugh.
right? Even though I know who I want to see, right? That whole thing
Oh yeah.
drove me nuts. And then some of those events, they would be in cahoots with the hotels,
Ugh.
right? And they would schedule some of these teams that they knew had to stay in hotels. They'd schedule them so they had to stay another night. I mean, there's just stuff like that going on that just drove me. And you and I have talked enough. I'm sure you know that I didn't take a lot of that lying down very well. It just bothered me. That this is where it's gone. Right, there was just so many people trying to get into people's pockets, right, and also kind of selling them on, oh, this is how you get exposure,
Right.
right. And the reality is, hey, if you can play, people are going to find you. They're going to figure out you can play. Right. And it doesn't matter how many, dollars you invest in your kids, summer basketball experience, if he can't play, he can't play. It's not going to change it. It's not, you can't buy it, right? It's just, it's not for sale.
You mentioned playing at Northwestern. I just kind of wanted to back up from there because I know that you went to high school. You graduated from a really good high school in Atlanta. I think it was Marist High School. You were a really good player there, but you didn't start there. Like you grew up in what, suburban Milwaukee? Is that correct? So outside of Milwaukee, is
Yeah.
that correct? And
Yeah.
I heard you on
Yeah.
the Hoops Head podcast a while back, and I remember you were talking about like the hotbed of hoops that you sort of had around you as a kid. And I think it was, you said your dad had some like partial season tickets to the Bucks, who were just like a expansion franchise at the time. Talk about like the people, the players, the legends that you kind of saw come through the Bucks, and you had Marquette there, and just all that was around you when you were a kid.
And I don't know if I ever told you this, but so both my parents are from the south side of Chicago.
I didn't know that.
And my dad's a St. Rita grad,
Oh boy.
and so I grew up between. We lived in Chicago area, Oak Forest down that way,
Yeah.
when I was really young, and then we moved up into the Milwaukee area, and it was really Al McGuire was the coach at Marquette
Yeah.
when I was a kid, and the expansion Bucks. Think about excuse me, think about this. So I remember the Bucks came in 67 or 68, I think. And so their expansion. So basically they plucked, the
Right.
bottom ended guys off all the teams. That's
Right.
how it kind of worked. And they were not very good. And so in 68, I'm 11 years old, right? And so I lived in Brookfield, which was a far west
Yeah.
suburb. And I remember getting on a bus at a shopping center out there with a buddy of mine and riding the bus to downtown Milwaukee, which you would never let your 11-year-old kid do
Right.
this now. Right. But I mean, we didn't think anything of it. And
Right.
I guess my parents didn't either. Right. And going to a double header NBA game. So the Bulls came up and the Bucks played, I don't know who, I can't remember who, and then the Bulls played, I can't
Wow.
remember who, for $5.
Wow.
$5 and the bus fare. Can you imagine that? It's crazy.
That is
And
crazy.
then Al McGuire had was a legendary coach. Obviously, he went to my church, so we went to a Catholic church on up in Brookfield, and he lived in that area. And so I would see him all. I would see him all the time. I had a chance when I was a little kid. My dad took me to Marquette practices. They had this old gym on their campus. It was like on the fourth floor of this old building up there, and he was recruiting guys from New York City. He had guys
Yeah.
from everywhere, and they were really really good. And I got to see a lot of those games. And then right away, the Bucks, because they were so bad, had the first pick in the draft, and they drafted Lou Alcindor,
Yeah.
who later changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And then the next year they got Oscar Robertson,
Yeah.
right? And won an NBA championship with Oscar Robertson. And I am I am as a 11, 12, 13-year-old kid, I'm seeing Jerry West in person, right? Oscar
Yeah.
Robertson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain, Bob Lanier, like Lenny Wilkins, who
That's
just
awesome.
passed away
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago. Gail Goodrich. I mean, just the list was unbelievable, and I got a chance to see all of those guys play in person. So if you were a kid who had any interest in hoops at all, that was just an amazing place and an amazing time to to be a basketball fan for sure.
You mentioned or I mentioned that you ended up you guys moved, like your family moved to Atlanta. You end up finishing high school at this really good school. You turned into a good player. How did you end up at Northwestern? So obviously, you know, Big Ten program. How did you end up from there all the way to Northwestern?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny. The recruiting is not, I mean, people, it's not an exact science, right? Like on either end for the
Right,
recruiter
right.
or the people being recruited. I remember just if you don't mind a little bit of a detour. The
Yeah.
so I There was a time I had my assistant in my office at DePauw, and we're getting ready to go out for the summer, right? And we're gonna go do all this stuff that I just complained about, but we're gonna do it because we think we got to do it, right? And I always tell them that recruiting is like offensive rebounding, right? Like you got to go, you know, you're not going to get it. It's not always going to work, but you got to go, you got to go, and that's the only way you're going to get a bounce is you got to go, right?
Right.
But I put like, I think it was the last 10, 11, 12 graduating classes on my whiteboard in my office, right? Guys who had played 4 years, right? And made it through. And I'm like, look, you know, we're going to go do all this stuff, but I don't think we should get like nervous about it, right? Because when you look at this list, there are more accidents on that list
Sure.
than guys that we sunk our teeth into in
Yeah.
June and you know rode them all the way to the finish line in May,
Right.
right? Like you know there were a few of those, but there were way more other guys that had their own story, and we
Sure.
found them different ways and that sort of thing. And that's kind of how my recruitment was as a player. I mean, I was a pretty good player and I was getting recruited, but not at that level. The the Like I was getting recruited by Georgia and Georgia Tech and people like that. I actually had a letter. I still have it somewhere from Dean Smith.
Wow.
So Dean's, and at the time they would send you, you know, they would send you like a written, you know, a letter. Hey, we heard
Sure.
about you. You know, fill out this questionnaire, right? So I get the North Carolina questionnaire, and you know, I filled it out, and I have my sister is 12 years younger than me, and I walk into this room, and she has colored and cut up the North Carolina questionnaire,
Wow.
right? Like I can't like fix it.
That's
Right.
amazing.
And so I wrote Coach Smith a note and he wrote me back with another questionnaire.
Oh my gosh.
And I never heard from him again. But it was pretty amazing. And I have the letter. He's like, you know what? I have kids too. I get it. You know, fill this out when you get a chance. It's pretty cool. But anyway, so I was kind of like you know a second tier guy at some of the D1s in the power guys, the you know the big conference guys in the southeast, and you know nobody was in a big hurry to offer me. It was kind of like, well, if we don't get this guy and we don't get this guy, you
Right.
know, then you know you're on the radar. So I was getting dangled a little bit by a few schools, and then unbeknownst to me, so I went to college and played with a high school teammate of mine. We both went to Northwestern, and went there on the because a guy who was like the ninth grade coach at Marist, my high school, sent film his brother-in-law, who's what was one of my good friends in college, was a freshman at Northwestern and a player and a good player. And he sent film to Northwestern and they liked it. Right. And so that tells you a little something about their recruiting. And that's why one of the reasons we weren't one of the reasons we weren't very good is they were like recruiting guys like me off some freshman coach in Atlanta his recommendation. But they liked the film and they had us visit and then they, illegally worked us out like crazy while we were there, right? Because they had never really seen us play in person.
Right, right,
And because there wasn't AAU and there wasn't any of
right.
that stuff. Like if you didn't know what was up, you weren't gonna be able to figure out who was who. So they liked us, and my guess is they didn't get everybody they wanted, and they offered us both, and we both went and had a I loved our teams. We weren't very good, but I loved the guys that I played with, and I loved my experience there, and I'm happy that it worked out the way it did. But it was a strange one, that's for sure.
After college, and I know that your first coaching gig was this Tampa Prep place. Now, is that the same place that your brother is now been for 40 years, or is that the
Yeah,
other that's the your first coaching gig, Tampa Prep? Like you got him an interview at some point, and he's been there 40 years. He's like a legend there. Is that
yeah.
correct?
I got him an interview a year. It was a year in between me and him. So I coached there for a year, left and went to another high school. There was a gap in between the next year. I don't know who was there. Somebody, I assume. And then he graduated from college. I got him the interview. He got the teaching and coaching job there, and he's been there ever since. He's the all-time winningest high school coach in the state of Florida. I saw his his uh, his son Connor also was a player and was a walk on at Siena College
Wow.
in New York, and he's my brother's kind of press agent. So he sent me a thing the other day that said he's also like the 24th winningest like all time coach nationally. He's won like 880 games or something crazy like that. It's nuts.
Uh,
It's a lot of
uh,
games.
yeah, that's and like the court really is named after him. Like he's got his name on the court. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
yeah. I went. I was still coaching when they named the court after him like 10 years ago,
That's awesome.
and I flew up for the ceremony. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Uh,
Pretty cool.
I mentioned your coaching path, which I'm gonna come back to it, but I want to put it out there. Your college coaching path, which is Sewanee. You were there 3 seasons, starting I think in '85, and then you go to Rose-Hulman, right in Terre Haute. And my wife grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana, so
Did she really?
she grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana for sure. Let's see, my wife's little brother's best friends with Brian Evans, who played for the Hoosiers. So Terre Haute South, I've become good friends with
Terre Haute
Brian.
South, man.
Terre Haute South, Brian's been on the QCast actually talking about Coach Knight. So you're at Rose-Hulman and then Southwestern for just like a cup of coffee situation there. And then DePauw. Um, the Sewanee to Rose move. You were starting to build it at Sewanee, right? You guys were doing pretty well there and started kind of getting it going. You were a young, well, you 26 or 7 years old as a head coach at Sewanee. You were young, but you were getting it going. Why the decision to go to Rose-Hulman? I'm just curious about like that part of the move.
Because I like to eat. I don't know about you. I do know about you. You
So
like to
money,
eat.
so money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So I didn't really know very much. Right. And it wasn't like you could Google stuff. Right. So I just thought, you know, no coaches got paid ever. Right. And I thought that's just how it was. Right. So I was, well, uh, the story is a weird story. If you want to hear it, I'll tell it to
Absolutely.
you. But so how I got there, right? So I left high school coaching. So my second high school job here, I was like the coach of the year in the city of Tampa, and we got to the final eight in the state, and it was a pretty good high school gig. And my wife is an actor, and a director. And once she settled in, she was a longtime theater professor at DePauw. And she's actually doing a bunch of stuff down here in Tampa. But anyway, after my second year of high school coaching down there, I got an opportunity to work with a team. This was like in the beginnings of the AAU stuff, right?
Sure.
And in fact, the team that I was working with was in an age group that they don't even have anymore. It was 19 and under, right? So you had guys who had graduated from school already,
Right.
right? And I worked as an assistant for a pretty established coach down here, and we were coaching what was called Team Florida. So we played the Russian junior national team. We took these guys to Central America. We won the national championship. There were 6 guys on that team that played in the NBA.
Wow.
So it was pretty cool, and people were chasing them around. And anyway, a guy offered me a job, right? And a little bit before that, my wife got offered an opportunity to work at the Actors Theater of Louisville,
Oh,
which is
cool.
one of the best regional theaters in the country. And she was going to be in their apprentice program, which is kind of
Right.
learn it all kind of stuff. And and I thought, well, the offer that I got was at Austin Peay State University, which is in Clarksville, Tennessee,
Yeah.
right? And back then, that was before the NCAA is always screwing up like what the staff is supposed to look like. So
Right.
back then you had like GAs and part-time guys, and you didn't know
Sure.
who could do what, and all of that kind of stuff. So I was going to be the part-time guy, but the way their staff was structured, I was also going to be recruiting and doing stuff like that. So anyway, I quit my job because now my wife and I were only going to be like 2 hours apart. So Clarksville, Tennessee, and Louisville are, 2.5 hours
Right.
apart. And we were just going to try this on, and we're 25 years old or whatever. We're going to try to see what we can do. And so I'm moving her into her apartment in Louisville, and you may remember that the newspaper used to come in paper,
It
right?
did. It did.
And and I'm reading the paper. I'm literally sitting on the curb outside of her apartment, and I'm reading the paper. And the first thing you would do if you're in coaching is you open a sports page, you look on the inside of the front page. On the left hand side, it's got all the transactions, right? Who got
Oh yeah.
traded, who
Yeah.
quit, who whatever. And I look through the transactions. It says the guy who's hired me has quit.
Oh boy.
He's resigned. To this day, I've never talked to the guy. Right? He's gone. I call up there and I talk to the assistants. I mean, I had been there, visited, met with the staff, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going up there to try to figure out where I'm going to live and do all that kind of stuff. And I talked to the guy who's going to be the interim, and he's like, "Hey, he's known he was out for a while. He didn't really do, we were funding your position separately, and he
Oh
didn't
my
really
gosh.
do any of that. So,
Okay.
you can come if you want to, but we really can't do anything for you. We can't pay you and feed you, house you." And I'm like, oh man, this is not good. Right. So now I'm an unemployed coach because I wasn't going to go work for these guys because it just sounded like a pretty messed up situation to me. So now I'm like, am I going to bartend, or I'm going to? So we didn't even have a phone hooked up in my wife's apartment that we were putting her in, and so I got to gather all my change from the car and I put it in a little cup, and of course I had a little address book with everybody's phone numbers and I just started dialing, everybody that I knew in coaching, right? Because I'm like, I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do. And the way it worked was a buddy of mine who I used to work camps with up at Lake Forest College, Rich Falk, the old head coach at Northwestern, used to run his camps up there. And I met this guy running camps, and he was a GA at Cornell at the time, and was kind of he was working for a night guy, was kind of hooked into the night thing, and he knew that Mike Krzyzewski's assistant at Duke had just taken the Sewanee job, and he's like, I don't think he's got anybody to help him. And he's like, here's his number. So I call him and he doesn't have anybody. And I, told him I played in the Big Ten and, but, coaching in high school in Florida. And he's like, well, come on down. Let's talk about it. So I drove there the next day and spent the day with him. And by the end of the day, he offered me a job as the
Wow.
assistant coach and the SID.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And he said, this is kind of the funny part. He said, you do this for a year or two and we'll figure out, what you can do because I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. He's like, because he thought they were going to make him the AD. He had just gotten married. He and his wife were building a house, all of this stuff. And he's coming from Duke now, right? He recruited Johnny Dawkins, right? And now he's at Sewanee, and they don't have any eggs in the athletic basket, right?
Right.
Like it's kind of the front end of D3, right? Nobody is
Right.
really knows what they're doing, and so we go through the first year, and we're like 500, and we're driving, and because he's a Duke guy, I live scouted every single opponent. I was in a car
Wow.
driving a million miles, and of course, we're driving in vans, right? We
Yeah.
were in what was called the CAC at the time. We were playing Rose-Hulman and Earlham. We're driving up in February to Terre Haute, Indiana from
Yeah.
Sewanee, Tennessee. Just so we're doing the laundry. We're doing everything that you do at the D3 level, and the season gets over, and he's like, hey, stick around because I'm going to get out of here as fast as I can. and and so we go through year two, and he's not out. He can't get out. He hasn't found another gig. And we're getting ready to start year three. And now I'm thinking, hey, I got to get out. Right. This is not going to be the long-term place that's going to work for me as an assistant here. And so the season's about to start, and he gets a job as the development AD at William and Mary.
Oh
The
wow.
new AD at William and Mary was the track coach at Army or something like that, and he knew him, and the guy hired him. And it was 2-3 weeks before the season was supposed to start, and they didn't really have a choice. They had to hire me. And so I was the head coach there for 3 years. And I don't think I ever cracked the $20,000 mark.
But didn't know you
And
didn't you just thought that that's like what
I
small
didn't know. I just thought
coaches.
that's what everybody was doing. So I get a call one day from the AD at Rose-Hulman, and he was a guy that I knew because he was a football coach at Northwestern when I was a player there. So, I knew him and not well, but and he was calling about my assistant. He was just calling around to see who was available and whatever because there was a guy named John Muchner who had been at Rose-Hulman for 30 years, was the AD before this guy, and he'd been there forever. And he starts telling me about the job, and I'm like, well, what's it going to pay? And he tells me, and I'm like, well, what about me? Because
Does
it
the
was going to
guy
be,
that
I got a,
does your assistant, the guy that they wanted originally, does he know to
they
this
didn't.
day that this transpired? Does he know that they wanted him?
Well, they didn't really want him. They were just
Okay, they're
checking,
poking around.
right? So yeah, he wasn't the job. He didn't even know the job was open,
Okay,
right?
gotcha.
And in fact, the guy is Tony Wingen, who ended up at Carnegie Mellon,
Yeah.
who
That's
just retired a
that's
year ago,
amazing.
and and so so I took the job. It was a 75% pay raise.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, so I could actually, because at this point I'm thinking I'm going to have to get out of coaching if this is the deal, right? Because we had our second kid on the way, and it was just like that. It just wasn't going to work. And then all of a sudden I could afford to be a coach, right? And we had 3 really good years at Rose-Hulman. It's a great place.
Yeah.
They're so good at what they do, and the I had the experiences that I had with the players there were incredible, and I'm really glad that I had that opportunity.
And I know that the move to Southwestern was like a one season deal where basically I think this part you told me somewhere at some Final Four. I can't remember which one it was, but that essentially you thought they were going to get in this conference. At the time, Texas only had a handful of D3s, maybe two or three, and they were supposed to get in a league. You get there, and the league says no. They didn't get in the league, and then you're left with like no schedule and no teams to play. And is that the Southwestern deal? Basically, you came thinking it was this cool Texas opportunity that you were getting recruited to, and you left so quick because it turned out at the time. Now, right now, that's a good job. That's a great job now. But at the time, it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. Is that how I remember that?
Yeah, that's basically it. We thought they thought that, and basically told me, yeah, we're going to get in this league. It's pretty much a done deal. Just has to get rubber stamped. And it turned out we ended up in the same league. So
Right.
at the time, Southwestern was going from NAIA to
Yeah.
Division 3, and they wanted to get somebody with some Division 3 experience on the staff, and that could kind of help not just coach the basketball team, but coach everybody,
Right.
right? And I thought that would be kind of cool thing to be involved with, that sort of transition. And I liked the location, and all of those kinds of things were nice. My parents actually live next to you in Dallas, and at the time, and my mom still does. But then all of a sudden we didn't get in the league, and like that first year, they just made up a D3 schedule. We played. We had a great year, but we flew like 7 times
Wow.
that
That's
year.
incredible.
I put those kids on airplanes 7 times.
Wow.
So we were playing all just to get D3 games,
Right.
right? And like the president wanted us to do that because he wanted to, start having a presence in Division 3, and it was great. We won 19 games. I'm still in touch with a lot of those kids that I coached on there. But long term, there was no one to play. Trinity was at the time the only other Division 3 team in the state,
Wow.
and that just wasn't gonna. You were going to have to play all these NAIs and D2s with money and all, and it was just going to be really hard to be good and to win. And I didn't
Right.
like that prospect very much. So, and I would have stayed had DePauw, I had relationships with people at DePauw. They kind of came after me, and it wasn't like I was really even, I was trying to figure out how I was going to make Southwestern work. And then, the opportunity to go to DePauw was, it just made it easier. It didn't make it easy. That was a pretty hard year. We moved,
Oh,
a
I'm sure.
thousand miles twice in 11 months with 2 little kids.
Oh,
It was, it was pretty rough, but we've survived it and lived to tell the tale.
Yeah, and DePauw, I think you replaced was that Royce Waltman that had left there? He was very successful,
Yeah.
and then
Yep.
he went somewhere in Division One, didn't he? Back when you could sort of go D3 to
Well, he left DePauw for the University of Indianapolis,
yeah,
which was Division II at the
yeah.
time, and they were great there. Did a great job. Got to the tournament a few times, and then he got the Indiana State job
That's right.
from there,
That's right. That's right.
and had some good teams and had some good runs there, and then eventually what gets you is what gets you. If you don't win enough. He had a
Right.
couple of rough years at the end, and actually that's one of my. I was telling this story the other day. I was talking to some of my pickleball guys this morning, but one is like a freak basketball guy, and that's all he wants to do is talk basketball to me every time, and I'm trying to work on my backhand, Bob. But he he's now I forgot I gave you the backhand joke and now I can't remember
It
what
was something
we
about
were
Royce
talking about.
Waltman, but I can't
Oh yeah,
remember.
he's at his final press conference, right? So he gets beat in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament, right? And he had one of the greatest quotes of all time. He knows he's getting fired, right? Like he knows he's out like the
Right.
next day. And he says, you know what? In this business, get fired for anything but losing, and you'll get another job. And when you look around the landscape of college basketball, you see it all the time at the Division I level,
Sure, football
right?
too. Yeah.
Guys that guys that get beat too much, they can't get another job. Guys that lie, cheat, and steal, they can
They
turn
end up
around and
okay.
grab another job if they need one. Yep. Yep.
Your first year at DePauw, I think, was 92, 93. That was first season at DePauw, which was I was a senior at Illinois Wesleyan, and um, it's amazing because this is I got to get into the up three to foul or not to foul because the D3 nation's gonna find this funny and fascinating. All the work that went into this, and I think the whole thing's fascinating. The math behind it. But the funny tie to all this is you reference in your white paper these three games that led up to like, wait a minute, there's got to be a different way here. And two of them, the first two, I was at. So November 21st, 1992 was at the Fred Young Fieldhouse. That was at Illinois Wesleyan. And that was Brian Martin, my classmate, knocking down a deep shot. I was a deep shot uh to what, send it to, was that send it to overtime, is that correct, went to overtime?
Yes. Yes.
So that's
Yes.
at Illinois Wesleyan. And then
First of all, we turned it over because my point guard stepped on the half court line because we're letting the air out, right? They got to
right,
foul us, put us on the free throw line, and he stepped on the half court line for an over and back call, which gave Wesleyan the ball.
it's
Right?
and I was,
Not that I'm obsessing about it. It was only
yeah,
35 years ago, but
and I was there with sitting in the Sigma Chi Hoopers Club as my guy Brian Martin sends it to OT. At the time, I just thought it was a big shot. I didn't know it was going to impact college basketball like this. And then two Novembers later, so this was November 19th, 1994, Illinois Wesleyan at DePauw, and Brian Crabtree, it has this ball that bounces all over the place and goes in to send it to OT. I think it was a 2 OT game that you lose. I can't remember the third game, but what went into, and by the way, coach, it's getting dark. Do we want to turn a light on there in the house? Like it's getting super dark behind
oh
you there,
yeah,
coach.
sorry.
Hold on. And there we go. Just like magic, it's light in Bill Fenlon's house. We got the lights on now. So you have this third game where the
Well,
same thing
I'm
happened.
on Bob. I'm on a fixed income. I'm trying to keep the
That's
electric
what I
bill down a little
assumed.
bit.
I know that you don't have like a full-time job right now. But so you have a third game where someone hits a three and sends you to overtime or whatever. When did you say to yourself, I'm going to study this? I'm going to study what's been happening to me about this up three thing. Like what drove you to actually do research?
Well, I'll tell you what. I know exactly the moment that I said, this is,
Wow.
I got to figure this out. So the third one was at Trinity, right?
San Antonio.
And we get beat in overtime. Brad Stevens was on that team. As a matter of fact, he was on the court at the time, and so we were in the league with Southwestern and Trinity, and so those two schools are pretty close together, and you'd have a day in between, right? And we're in the hotel room with I'm with a buddy of mine who was along on the trip, and he eventually came to work with me, and then became the head coach at Manchester College, Brad Nadborn.
Nads, absolutely.
Yeah, Nad's really good basketball dude, and a character of the first order.
Yes.
And so he and I are watching a game, and I'm gonna say it was SMU for sure, and I'm gonna say it was maybe Wichita State. And we're in the hotel room, right? And we've been kicking it around a little bit, right? And the whole idea of, do you foul? Do you not foul? And the situation comes up in this game that we're watching, the
Wow.
exact same thing, right? And SMU is up 3, and uh, they run the ball. Wichita State runs the ball down the floor. SMU's not gonna foul, right? They get a what I think is a pretty good look at it, right? As the buzzer goes off, and they miss, and I'm like, and everyone's jumping around and clapping and real happy, but it could have gone in
Sure.
easily.
Sure.
It easily could have gone in, and I'm like, in that situation, if you don't do something about it, they're going to get a shot every time,
Right.
right? That is the moment when I'm like, I'm pretty sure that if I broke this down, it would tell me something that like in my gut I haven't really been feeling, right? Like in my
Right.
gut I'm like, we got to stop them. We got to, what if X, Y, and Z happens and it backfires on me? Like you like to post all the things when it backfires.
Of the failed Fenlon finish, as I
But
like to say.
yeah, but you never post the one
I
from
did.
you did post
I
the
did get
Chicago game. You did.
Coach McGrath fouled and it worked, and I posted it. I did.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's not nearly as fun, right? I mean, it's not nearly as interesting. And I like it boring like that. Boring is good. So that was the moment, for sure, that I'm like, I'm going to dive into this and really try to understand the numbers a little bit better than just like what's my competitive kind of
Sure.
instinct telling me to
I like
do.
that you remember the
And
exact moment over the holidays. Back to the Future was on, like the moment that Doc Brown discovered the flux capacitor. It reminds me, like when genius is inspired, it's like this. Now the whole premise, in all seriousness, behind this is the math, and you had some people that worked with you on this research. So Mark Kanowski was your mathematics guy. Then you had a gentleman that helped you kind of with the editing side of this work. But if I have this right, if you don't fall and you just hunker down up 3, the odds are that 1 out of every 5 times, 1 out of every 5, the game's going to overtime when you play out the scenarios.
right.
But if you do foul, you send them to the line, and whatever happens, they make the first, they intentionally miss the second, blah, blah, blah. If you foul, only 1 in 20 times will you go to overtime? And so, first of all, I think those numbers are correct. Are those the general numbers that you talk about when you talk about this
Yeah,
scenario?
yeah, I think so. I haven't looked back on it for a while. I actually pulled it up uh, before we talked, but what happens is you when you start to stack the probabilities on top of each other,
Right.
that's when it can get the thing that people worry about the most, right, is getting beat in that scenario.
And there was
And
one of
that's
those in
when
the
the thing
last
goes
week that I posted that one, right? They
right. But
it was a
that's where the
D1
things
game.
go. Yeah, that's where the things go astronomical, though.
Yeah.
Right? That's when the numbers go crazy. Like you saw that happen. That's not going to happen again.
No.
Right?
Right.
It's like one. It's like 1 in 800
Right.
times.
Because
Right?
the
So
guy has to
that's not going
make
to happen.
because you foul, the guy's got to make that first free throw. And there's the odds that he won't. And then he's got to intentionally miss the second. And the offensive team has to get the rebound. Then a guy has to hit a 3-point shot. Like you're talking about odds and odds and odds at that point. I
Yeah.
just
So
happened
yeah.
to
So
find
we.
one
So
to
you're.
send to you.
Yeah. That's what I mean. That you're stacking them up, right? So when you think about it, and that's the thing that I never thought about, that I had to really spend some time thinking about, right? So it's like, well, he's got to make the first one, right? So if it's a good shooter, maybe he's going to make 75. He's
85%.
going to make the
Yeah.
first one set. Yeah, 75% of the time, right? Well, that means 25% of the time he's never going to make the first one,
Right. Right.
right? So let's say he makes the first one. Well, I mean, if you're going by national averages, I think at the time that I wrote this, the national free throw average was just under 70%
Yeah.
for Division One, and so there's another 25% chance he ain't gonna make the free throw, right? And then the second one, he's got to miss. Well, missing's not as easy as you think it is,
You're right.
right?
Because you have to hit the
So if
rim,
he
right?
if he doesn't hit the rim, that's a violation. The game is over.
Right.
Basically, you're gonna
Right.
take it in, right? Right. If he does hit the rim now, and when I wrote this, and it was different at the time that I got beat on it, is now the free throw line is stacked with rebounders.
Right.
There's only two. There's only two offensive rebounders on the lane,
Right.
right? So you're 4 on 2 down there,
Right.
right? In terms of like blocking out and
Yeah.
and having a chance to go get it and those kinds of things. So then you have to assign a percentage to, okay, he misses the second. What are the percentages that
Yeah.
you're gonna get the ball, right? Just get the ball.
Right.
Now, once you have the ball,
You got to get it to a
what are you
shooter.
gonna do?
Right.
There's another percentage that you have to assign, or score it yourself, right? Because assuming that you're down three, he's made the first one, a two will tie,
Right.
but it'll only tie,
Right.
right? I like seeing all of those things have to happen, boom, 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 rather than one guy making one shot, right? Which
Right.
is which is what which is what happens if you don't foul,
One
right? I think we
fascinating
assigned
thing,
something like
something that you said in your work is that you had a player on your team at DePauw that actually was practicing intentionally committing a lane violation because on the second free throw, because a lane violation means the free throw is good, which is fine, right? Is it? Did you ever
right.
figure out like does the official, if the official knew you were trying to commit
Yes.
a lane violation, would he give it to you? I don't. How does that work?
So yeah, so there were a couple years where I was like obsessed with this, right? And I remember the kid was a guy named Todd Humrickhouse from Bloomfield, Indiana, and Hum was a freshman on the team. So we're practicing it. And that's the other thing. It's like people are nervous, and one of the reasons they're nervous is they don't practice it,
Right, you got to practice
right?
this.
And now you're trying to make it up in the huddle,
Right.
Well, you don't really trust your guys are understand, right,
Right.
what's going on, and the reason is you haven't practiced it,
Right.
right? Like my guys would absolutely know what we're doing in that situation,
It's just
right?
part of your
They
culture.
wouldn't have to be told. Yeah, they know the time. They know
Yep.
they know the chant. They know we want to get them while they're dribbling it. We know they can't be in the act. They know it all. They know what we're trying to do, which gives you a. They can still screw it up. Don't get me wrong, but it gives you a little bit of a comfort level with what's going on, and invariably that's what you hear from coaches. It's like, oh, I don't trust them, right? And well, you
Right.
don't trust them because you haven't worked that. You work every other situation, right? But you haven't worked that situation, and so is every time the guy goes in to shoot it, he's intentionally violating the lane. And finally, I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, coach, it seems to me that he can't actually. I can if I violate every time, he can't
They can't get the
actually
ball.
miss it. He's going to have to make it,
That's the
right? And then
genius.
we'll have the ball and we'll be up one." And I'm and I'm like, I'm looking at like I'm almost yelling at him, like, "Come on, we're trying to practice this thing." And then I realize he's doing it on purpose, and he's right, right?
That's
And
amazing.
I hadn't even really thought of that. I thought I had thought about it inside and out, and I hadn't even thought about that situation. So what I got from officials in answer to your question is uh, they would give you a warning,
Oh, they would.
and then
Okay.
they'd give you they would get at once they realized what was going on. But the thing about it, if you just did it once,
Yeah.
teams will usually have, like, if you saw the what game was it? Was it Stanford? The
Yeah.
the they got it.
Versus SLU versus St. Louis University, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So whoever it was, the rebounding team, they ran a little stunt, right? So
Right.
they sprinted the guy to the opposite block to try to beat his guy. So there's a bunch of different things that you can do on the missed free throw, right? To try to
Right.
get yourself out of that rebounding disadvantage, and but people don't have three or four of those things, right?
Right. Right.
So if you violate intentionally the first time, you're probably going to get a look at what they're doing,
Right.
right?
Right.
And once you know what they're doing, it raises the percentages even more
Oh yeah.
that they're not going to be able to execute it. So the numbers just continue to stack on top of each other as the thing gets deeper and deeper. And I just think it's kind of it feels like a no brainer to me. What happens is guys they want to waffle, right? They want to. I'll do it if I got the right rebounders in there. I'll do it
Right.
if I've, we're they have the right free throw shooter up there, whatever. And I think that's going to skew the numbers as much as anything else. Like, I think you got to just say, this is what we do,
That's
and
our strategy.
we're going to roll the dice and go with what the numbers are. I think one of the things that I say in, like, if you believe the numbers, and you could mess around with it, a couple of percentage points here and there, but I think the gap is wide enough
Right.
that if you believe the numbers, why wouldn't you do it? It's kind of like, let's say there's a technical foul, right? And Quillman, he shoots 95% from the free throw line, but I'm going to put Joe Blow on the free throw line who's shooting 65%.
Right.
No one's ever going to do that, right?
Right. Right.
Why? Because you believe the numbers,
Right.
right? So that's why I broke it down like this, because it's like, here's the numbers, and they don't, if you can kind of get with those numbers, or at least close, they don't really lie. But ultimately, guys are totally afraid of the 1 in 800 chance
Right.
that you could get beat in that scenario.
And just a couple final questions on this, because this is great stuff and people will enjoy this for sure. Is there was your number is 7 seconds. Like you want the foul at 7 or under in a perfect world. There was that situation 2 weeks ago where Illinois Wesleyan is hosting Mike McGrath in Chicago. And Illinois Wesleyan is up 3 with, I think it was 11 seconds. Chicago has to go the length of the court. And 11 to the Titans did not foul. They hunkered down, as you call it. And 11 seconds to me seemed tricky. We were chatting about this, I think, online. Is 11 seemed tricky to me because by the time you get it up there, they were in shoot mode at this point, and they've got great shooters. And I think the fear is that you foul one of those shooters. How do you teach that to where a guy doesn't foul the shooter? Because to me, that's one of the worst things that can happen in all this. How do you teach fouling in the right place? Because I could see that going wrong. I guess it comes down to you got to be practicing that. Is that what it all comes down
You
to?
practice it, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. You practice it, right? Like and I'm sure Ron is the same way because my guess is they don't practice it
I'm guessing they don't.
because maybe he's not a fouler, right? And if you're not a fouler, you're never going to practice it, right? You're just going to guard
Probably.
and hope for the best. Now they did squeeze a shot off, and it was a shot that could have gone in,
Oh, it hit the
right?
front of the rim. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it could have gone in. Now, how do you do it? You just so what we would do is I'm not going to say it every day or even every week, but we would play what I would call we call them 1 minute games, right? We just play,
Right.
right? Sometimes we'd set a score, sometimes we wouldn't set a score, and so the situation would come up naturally, right? And a lot, right? And in fact, it would come up naturally so often it used to piss me off because because we couldn't work on our other things,
Right.
right? Like we
Right.
couldn't work on what are we
Yeah.
going to do against the team that doesn't foul,
Right.
right? What kind of play are we going to run to try to get a shot, right? And my assistants, they were, if I was coaching a team and they were coaching a team, they're always fouling, right? And so you never got to work on that stuff. But you just have to achieve a comfort level with the whole idea, and again, it's like I said before, it's not like guys couldn't screw it up, right? But I also have percentages built into those numbers for the screw ups,
Right.
right? So if you read the thing, you'll see that I have a percentage assigned for, oh, you're going to foul this guy in the act, right? And even if you foul him in the act, he's got
You
to
still
make
got to
all three
make
free
them.
throws
You still got to make three
to
free throws
tie,
in a
right?
row.
Right. He's got to make all three, and then the fouling a guy in the act who makes the 3-pointer,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then that's one of the two ways you can get beat, right? The numbers they're just not numbers you can worry about,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Over the
It's the
course of
1 in 5 number that you got to
yeah.
worry about.
In that case, the game I mentioned, one thing I said to you was like, well, we're getting slaughtered on the boards by Chicago in this game, and they have this Nick Roper on their team who's this 6'8" bouncy dude, and they have elite shooters. And so, like, you put them to the line, they make the first free throw. I guess this is the odds upon the odds upon the odds. Is you're worried that Nick Roper or one of these big Chicago dudes is getting the rebound like they had been all game. They kick it out to one of these shooters, Shane Reagan, whoever, and you get beat. You get beat in that situation. But to your point, you got to trust. If you got to practice it, and you got to trust the odds. It might happen like it did the other day, Stanford and SLU. It might happen, but over the
Yeah.
course of
Yeah.
time, you got to trust the odds of that. Is that a good summary?
Yeah. Exactly. I think it's a little nerve wracking for people, right?
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
think it's, especially if you're watching it, right? But I
Yeah,
think it's like anything else. The more familiar you are with with what's going on in the situation, the more comfortable you're going to be,
sure,
right?
sure.
What I decided I wasn't comfortable with was watching some guy shoot a three
Watching Brian Martin not
and
give a 30-footer.
watching that ball in the air and wondering if it's going to go in or not. So I took that out of the equation. You don't get to shoot the three,
That's
right?
great.
I'm not going to let you do that. You're going to have to do this right, this right, this right, this right. The ball's going to have to do all of these things for you to get to that for you to get to that point. And we've I've actually tweaked the numbers a little bit just uh because I'm such a loudmouth about the whole thing that everyone knew I was going to do it, right? So you can kind of get ready for it. So you can't believe, I'd say since I wrote the thing, I was probably in that situation maybe a dozen times, right? Over the
Sure.
next 20 years or whatever it's been, maybe more. But there were a bunch of different times where guys tried to get in the act of
Oh
shooting
yeah, because they knew it was coming.
from from some really bad places,
Yeah, like
right?
half
Just
court
because
or
they thought
something.
they were going to,
Yeah.
yeah, they thought they were going to get fouled, and we never screwed that up. So we never got called for a foul in that situation or anything like that. But guys were trying to
Not bad.
anticipate, getting called and getting into the act as soon as they could, but it never bit us.
Just one final question. It ties to this, and it ties to one final guy to ask you about. So, ironically, you're watching one of your former players play in the big time dance, the D1 Final Four. So Brad Stevens is coaching Butler. They're playing Michigan State in the 2010 Final Four. You're in the building, and lo and behold, Butler leads 52-49 with 6 seconds left. You're in the building watching this play out. Now, I assume that Coach Stevens at this point is a disciple of the theory. Is he a believer at this point? And he was on your team when you invented the flux capacitor, as I say. But was he
I
well versed in this?
Oh, he was very well versed. However, I would not say he was on the team.
Okay,
I think if you know, Brad is a very deep thinker and also a super close to the vest guy, right?
gotcha.
So even if he was on the team, the last thing he would want people to know is that he was on the team, right?
That he believed that
So
he wouldn't want to say that
yeah,
out loud. Yeah,
yeah. Well, right, because that gives you an
showing his
edge, right?
cards. Right,
I gave up my edge by writing the thing,
right,
right?
right.
And making and making it a big deal, and telling everybody that didn't do
Right.
it that they were dumb, and all of that. So I gave that up, but
Yeah.
he was never going to give that up, and he I would call him, at the time at least, more of a situationalist,
Okay.
right? So he
I
was
like that you have names. A
more
situationalist.
who are yeah who are the rebounders, right?
Yep.
What can we keep them off the glass? Are we going to be able to get the ball? That sort of stuff. And yeah, that was a nerve wracking. That was the most nervous I've been in that situation, because I'm watching it and I'm like, they're coming out of a timeout, I think, and
Yeah.
I'm going, you gotta come on, man, you
You
gotta
got to
go,
foul.
you gotta do it right here, you gotta foul him, and then he
He
fouls him,
fouled him. He
and
fouled
then
him
I'm
near
like,
right over half
yeah,
court. Fouled the guy that was not
yeah,
shooting. Fouled him perfectly. It all worked out. The guy made the first. Then that stud guy they had at that era, what
hey,
Gordon?
Gordon
He
Hayward,
got the
Gordon
rebound.
Hayward, and I'm like, but I'm up there going, you got to foul him. And then when he fouled him, I'm like, oh no, he fouled him. And then, and then I'm worried, like, what if this doesn't,
Like,
what if
what if
it's
the
the one
disaster
and
happens? Right.
yeah, what, because it can happen. It's
Oh
not like
man.
a foolproof thing,
Yeah, then
right?
that's on
And so
you.
yeah, right. Well,
That's on you
I'm
for
sure he
sure.
wouldn't have held me responsible. However, I would have felt a little bit responsible.
Now, is
So,
it true that you
it
texted him when this, like, in the moments after the buzzer, you texted him? It said something like, "You finally listened to me." Is that urban legend or true?
no, he said, I finally listened.
Oh, he texted you.
I said, I said I said you are coachable, and he said I finally listened, and it was great. I mean, you can't imagine what watching some kid
Yeah.
that you were involved with for 4 years and watch him grow and have that sort of opportunity. That story's pretty amazing.
Well,
But
I think
kids like that.
yeah,
And I always told guys about the kids at DePauw. It's like, we got a lot of guys that have gone through our program and graduated from the university who are every bit as successful as Brad. And not to take anything away from Brad, but they're not on TV.
right. They're in jobs that aren't on
Nobody's paying
TV.
attention to him. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just he's just got one of those gigs, where people pay a lot of attention.
It's a really cool story, and it kind of puts a bow on that. And I think people will find the whole up three to follow, not to follow story interesting. It's great research. It's hard to argue with all the math that goes into it. It really is. We could talk basketball all day, and so I better leave you at this point, Coach Fenlon. Maybe we need to do a part two at some point, but it's been a pleasure talking about your story and your background. There's so much we didn't get a chance to get into. We can another time, but I do want to give you kind of the final words here. You're going to have a lot of people from D3 Hoops Nation tuning in. Certainly the QCast fans, people from DePauw tuning in. What would you like to leave everyone with today, Coach Fenlon, on the QCast?
Well, uh, so I retired, and I've had a chance to talk to groups and that kind of stuff, and they're like, well, what are the takeaways, right? And the takeaways, my two top takeaways from 37 years as a head coach in Division 3, and what the first one is, you can't win them all, right? It just sounds trite, but it's true. You go out there and you're trying to win them all, right? But you can't. So you have to kind of figure out how to navigate that part of it, right? And it's not always easy. And I think when you are trying to navigate that part of it, keeping in mind why you're doing it in the first place is the easiest and best way to handle the bumps in the road and the things that happen, and some of the things that are not always positive about the experience. If you remember why you got into coaching in the first place, or why you play in the first place, and those kinds of things, I think it makes the fact that there's
Sure.
only one winner, every time you go out there, a little bit easier to swallow. And my second takeaway uh, is anything can happen, right? So, and what I mean by that, that's why you keep playing, right? That's why you foul at the end of games. That's why you take timeouts, right? That's why, guys who maybe aren't getting to play as much as they want to play early in the season keep coming to the gym every day and working,
Yeah.
because they know they're going to get they can get some sort of opportunity to maybe get it the way they want it a little further down the line. And anything can happen to a player in terms of growth. Anything can happen to a coach in terms of success and opportunity and relationship building and all of those kinds of things. You just have to stay open to the stuff that's going on around you, and you got to keep plugging away. We used to have a saying in our group. It was simple, and we'd use it in practice, we'd use it in games, and it was just the two initials, KP. Just keep playing, right? whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's going your way, it's not going your way. You just got to keep playing. And if I was going to give anybody any advice, that would be it. Just keep playing.
Great stuff. And really appreciate the time that you've taken to do this. It's always great to see you at the Final Four or at a game somewhere. Appreciate your approach. And I always say that us fans like the coaches that won't big time you, that'll actually have a conversation with you. And you're one of those dudes. And I can tell you that we all appreciate that. Coach Fenlon, we really appreciate your time today. This is QCast Season 6, Episode 7. Good luck trying to continue to figure out what normal people do. Good luck with your broadcasting gig and the consulting gig. And we'll see you in a gym somewhere not too long from now, okay?
Yep, great to be with you, man. Thanks for the opportunity. I've been waiting for a long time to get on the QCast.
It's a long list. Congratulations, you made it. Thank you, Coach. I appreciate you. Thanks, man.
Thanks.